Before I dive in, kindly click on the subscribe button. I still remember the sound of her belongings clattering into the cardboard box. Each item, a framed photo of her daughter, a small potted succulent, a coffee mug with the words "World's Best Mom," fell with the hollow finality of a career ending. My husband Richard stood over her desk, his jaw clenched in that way that always sent ice through my veins, as the entire office watched in horrified silence. "You have 15 minutes to collect your things and leave the premises," he announced, loud enough for everyone on the floor to hear. "Security will escort you out." Olivia Bennett, 32 years old, single mother of a 7-year-old with a heart condition, and by all accounts one of the hardest workers in our company, looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Please," she whispered. "I need this job. Lily's surgery is next month." "You should have thought about that before you missed those deadlines," Richard cut her off, his voice as sharp as the designer letter opener he always kept on his desk. "Perhaps you should focus less on personal problems and more on professional obligations." I stood frozen by the elevator, my hand covering my mouth. I'd just arrived to surprise Richard with lunch, something I did occasionally to maintain the facade of the perfect corporate wife. Nobody noticed me witnessing this execution. Nobody except Olivia, whose eyes met mine in a fleeting moment before she lowered her head and began emptying her desk drawer. That night, Richard came home triumphant. He poured himself an expensive scotch and loosened his tie with the satisfaction of a general who'd just won a strategic battle. "Had to cut out the dead weight today," he announced, sinking into his leather armchair. Bennett was becoming a liability. Always some excuse about her kid or doctor's appointments. "We're running a business, not a charity." I nodded and served dinner, the perfect supportive wife I'd trained myself to be over our 15-year marriage. But inside, something cracked, a hairline fracture in the foundation of our carefully constructed life. 3 days later, I found myself parked outside a modest apartment complex on the other side of town. I'd gotten the address from HR files I wasn't supposed to access using Richard's passwords he didn't know I knew. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clutched an envelope containing $5,000 in cash, money from my private account that Richard had no idea existed. What was I doing? If Richard found out, the consequences would be. I couldn't even imagine. Our marriage operated on unspoken rules, and the most important one was absolute loyalty. But the image of Olivia's face, and the thought of her daughter waiting for surgery, haunted me. I almost drove away. 3 times I started the engine, and 3 times I shut it off again. Finally, gathering courage I didn't know I possessed, I walked to apartment 307 and knocked. When Olivia opened the door, the shock on her face mirrored what must have been on mine. Behind her, I glimpsed a small living room where a little girl with dark curls sat drawing at a coffee table, an oxygen tank beside her. "Mrs. Blackwood," Olivia said, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing here?" In that moment, I made a decision that would ultimately unravel everything. "I'm here to help," I said, pressing the envelope into her hands. "And please, call me Claire." What I didn't know then was that this single act of rebellion against my husband would set in motion a chain of events that would expose secrets buried for years. Secrets that Richard would kill to protect. Secrets about our company, our marriage, and most disturbingly, about Richard himself. I couldn't have known that 6 months later, Olivia Bennett would reappear in our lives like a ghost rising from the grave Richard had dug for her. And when she did, nothing would ever be the same again. For months after that first encounter, I lived a double life. On the surface, I remained Richard's perfect wife, hosting dinner parties for his clients, appearing at corporate events on his arm, maintaining our showcase home in the exclusive Hawthorne Hills neighborhood. But beneath that carefully polished veneer, I was someone else entirely. Every Thursday afternoon, when Richard believed I was attending my book club, I visited Olivia and Lily. The first few visits were awkward, stilted conversations over tea while Lily showed me her drawings. But gradually, something shifted. The money I'd given them helped cover immediate expenses, but Lily's medical bills were mounting. I found myself bringing groceries, paying for medications, and eventually helping Olivia prepare for job interviews. "Why are you doing this?" Olivia asked me one afternoon as we sat on her small balcony. Lily was napping inside, her breathing finally stabilized after a rough morning. "You're risking everything. If your husband found out." I stared down at my wedding ring, platinum and diamonds, ostentatious and heavy. "I don't know," I admitted. Then, after a pause, "That's not true." "I do know." The words that followed surprised even me. 15 years ago, I was you. Single mom, desperate, nowhere to turn. I hadn't spoken of this to anyone in over a decade. My daughter, Emma, had leukemia. I was drowning in debt, working 3 jobs. Then I met Richard. He seemed salvation itself. Olivia's eyes widened. "I didn't know you had a daughter." A familiar pain constricted my chest. "I don't. Not anymore. Emma died before our first anniversary. Richard paid for everything, the best doctors, experimental treatments. But it wasn't enough. What I didn't tell Olivia was how quickly Richard insisted we move forward afterward. How he prohibited photographs of Emma in our home. How he referred to my previous life as if it were a shameful chapter best forgotten. "I'm sorry," Olivia whispered, reaching for my hand. That simple touch, human connection without agenda or performance, broke something in me. For the first time in years, I cried openly, without fear of judgment or reprisal. What I couldn't have known then was that while I was building this secret friendship, Richard was constructing something far more sinister. The first hint came in late April, when I overheard a phone conversation that made my blood run cold. "The Richardson acquisition is proceeding as planned," Richard said, his voice uncharacteristically hushed in his home office. "They have no idea we've falsified the environmental impact reports. By the time anyone discovers the contamination, we'll have stripped the assets and dissolved the holding company." I froze outside the door, my heart thundering. The Richardson deal was Richard's crowning achievement, a billion-dollar acquisition of pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities that had made headlines in the business world. Richard had been celebrated as a corporate visionary for it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Environmental contamination. Falsified reports. How many people could be harmed? Was this why Richard had fired Olivia? Had she discovered something she shouldn't have? The next day, I broke my routine and visited Olivia unannounced. She'd recently found work as an administrative assistant at a local law firm, not the executive position she deserved, but enough to keep them afloat with my continued help. "I need to ask you something," I said after ensuring Lily was occupied with her homework in the next room. "Why did Richard really fire you?" Olivia's face paled. She glanced toward her daughter before leading me onto the balcony and closing the door. "I thought you knew." Her voice trembled. "I was compiling data for the Richardson acquisition when I noticed discrepancies in the environmental testing. Soil samples from different sites with identical results, statistically impossible. When I brought it to your husband's attention, he said he'd look into it." She wrapped her arms around herself. 3 days later, I was fired for performance issues I'd never been warned about. My stomach churned. "Olivia, this is serious. It's criminal." "I know," she whispered. "But who would believe me over Richard Blackwood? He made sure I left with nothing, no evidence, no credibility. Just my word against his." That night, I made a decision that terrified me. While Richard slept, I crept into his office and accessed his computer. Years of watching him enter his password while pretending not to notice finally proved useful. For hours, I downloaded files, emails, reports, anything connected to Richardson Pharmaceuticals. What I found sickened me. The facilities Richard had acquired were built on land saturated with carcinogens. The company had knowingly continued production, endangering not just workers but communities downriver from their waste disposal. Richard's company had created shell corporations to insulate themselves from liability. The potential human cost was staggering. I copied everything onto a flash drive and returned to bed, lying rigid beside my husband as dawn broke. The man breathing peacefully next to me was a stranger, worse, a monster wearing the face of someone I once believed I loved. 2 days later, the package containing the flash drive was safely with Olivia. "Take this to your new employers," I told her. "They're attorneys. They'll know what to do." What I didn't anticipate was how quickly everything would unravel, or how viciously Richard would fight back when cornered. 1 week later, coming home from a charity luncheon, I found our house swarming with private security. Richard stood in our foyer, his face a mask of cold fury I'd never seen before. "Where is it, Claire?" he demanded, grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise. "What are you talking about?" But my racing pulse betrayed me. Richard pulled me close, his whisper chilling. "If you think I don't know about your little friendship with Olivia Bennett, you're even more naive than I thought. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Or what I'm capable of." As security continued tearing apart our home, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Olivia. "They came for me. Lily and I are safe. Don't come home. He knows." "Where is the drive?" Richard enunciated each word like separate sentences, his fingers digging deeper into my wrist. I'd never seen that particular look in his eyes before, a coldness that went beyond anger into something predatory. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed, though my voice betrayed me with a slight tremor. He released me suddenly, straightening his already immaculate tie. The gesture was so familiar. Richard always adjusted his tie before making a power move in business. I'd seen it countless times before board meetings, firings, hostile takeovers. Never had it been directed at me. "Security," he called calmly to the men ransacking our home. "Mrs. Blackwood needs to rest. Please escort her to the bedroom and ensure she remains comfortable while we continue our sweep." 2 men immediately flanked me. Not rough, but unmistakably firm. Guards, not escorts. "Richard, what is happening?" I demanded, injecting indignation into my voice. "These men are destroying our home. Have you lost your mind?" A thin, reptilian smile crossed his face. "I've lost nothing, Claire. But you're about to lose everything if that drive isn't recovered. I've built this life for us, and I won't let you tear it down out of some misplaced sentimentality for a fired employee." As they led me upstairs, my mind raced. Richard knew about Olivia but hadn't mentioned the files specifically. Maybe he didn't know exactly what I'd taken. A small advantage, but I'd need every edge to survive what was coming. Locked in our bedroom, I paced frantically. Through the window, I could see additional security patrolling the grounds. My phone had been confiscated. I was a prisoner in my own home. Hours passed. Night fell. Eventually, Richard entered, looking exhausted but controlled. "Nothing," he said, closing the door behind him. "You've hidden it well. Or perhaps your new friend has it." He studied my face. "Yes, I thought so." He sat on the edge of our bed, and for a disorienting moment, he looked like the man I'd married, handsome, confident, capable. "Sit down, Claire." I remained standing. "You don't understand what you've done," he continued. "The Richardson acquisition isn't just a business deal. It's protection." "Protection from what?" I demanded. "From the families being poisoned by those chemicals? From the workers developing cancer? That's not protection, Richard. It's mass murder for profit." His laugh was hollow. "Always so dramatic. Do you think business empires are built on niceties? The world runs on necessary evils, Claire. I thought you understood that. Like you understood necessary evils when Emma was dying." The words escaped before I could stop them. Richard went still. "We never spoke of Emma." "Never." "Don't," he warned quietly. But something had broken loose inside me, a dam of 15 years of silent grief and suspicion. "She was getting better," I pressed on, my voice shaking. "The experimental treatment was working. The doctors said her blood work was improving. Then suddenly, overnight, She crashed. No explanation. Richard stood abruptly. This conversation is over. The insurance policy, I continued, the pieces I'd buried for years suddenly aligning with terrible clarity. $5 million. Enough to start your first company. Your big break came 1 month after my daughter died. Our daughter, he corrected automatically, but something flickered across his face, something I'd been too grief-stricken to notice 15 years ago. You were at the hospital alone with her that night, I whispered, the horror of my suspicion stealing my breath. The night the complications happened. You're becoming hysterical, he said coldly. This is precisely why we agreed never to discuss that unfortunate chapter. It clouds your judgment. Did you do something to her, Richard? My voice was barely audible, but the question filled the room like a scream. The slap came so quickly I didn't see it coming. My head snapped to the side, and I tasted blood where my teeth had cut my inner cheek. That's enough, he hissed. I've given you everything. Made you into someone who matters. Without me, you're nothing, just another desperate single mother who couldn't save her child. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat rising where his hand had connected. In 15 years of marriage, he'd never struck me. The shock of it cleared my mind with startling precision. You did, didn't you? I whispered, certainty washing over me. You did something to Emma when her recovery threatened to derail your plans. Richard's expression confirmed everything before he could compose himself. Just a flicker, but I knew. You're confined to this room until this situation is contained, he stated, his voice businesslike again. For your own protection, of course. When you're thinking clearly, you'll realize what's at stake and tell me where the drive is. After he left, locking the door behind him, I collapsed onto the floor. Grief I'd suppressed for 15 years crashed over me in violent waves. My daughter. My beautiful Emma. Not taken by cancer, but by the man I'd married, who had seen her as an obstacle to his ambitions. I don't know how long I sat there, tears streaming down my face. Hours, maybe. The house grew quiet. Through my window, I could see it was well past midnight when my bedroom door silently opened. I braced myself for Richard's return, but the figure in the doorway was smaller, feminine. Claire, Olivia whispered urgently. We have to move now. I stared at her in disbelief. How did you get in here? No time, she insisted, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Security's changing shifts. We have 5 minutes, maybe less. But how? I worked here for 3 years, she interrupted. I know every security protocol your husband implements. Now come on. As I followed her through the darkened hallways of my prison home, she whispered, the drive is safe. My attorneys have already begun building a case. But that's not why I came back. She paused at a corner, checking for guards. I found something else while analyzing the files. Something about her insurance policy payout from 15 years ago. A child named Emma Winters. My maiden name. My daughter's name. There's evidence, Claire, Olivia continued as we slipped through a service entrance. Medical records that were altered. A nurse's statement that was suppressed. Your husband didn't just steal your daughter's future. He stole her life. Outside, a car waited with its lights off. Inside, I could make out a small figure in the back seat, Lily, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Why? I asked as we hurried across the grounds. Why risk everything to come back for me? Olivia's eyes met mine in the darkness. Because 6 months ago, you were the only person who saw me as human when I lost everything. Now it's my turn to save you. As we reached the car, an alarm suddenly blared from the house. Floodlights illuminated the grounds. And through the chaos of shouting security guards, I saw Richard standing at our bedroom window, his face contorted with rage as he watched his perfect life, and his darkest secret, slipping away. Drive! Olivia yelled, pulling me into the car as gunshots rang out behind us. Before I continue, kindly hit the subscribe button if you haven't. The car swerved wildly as we hit the main road, tires screeching against asphalt. Olivia's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. In the back seat, Lily whimpered softly. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said automatically, turning to comfort her. Our eyes met in the darkness, this child who had unknowingly brought me back to life, who had reminded me of Emma in 100 small ways. "We're going to be all right." 2 black SUVs just turned onto the road behind us, Olivia reported tensely. "Richard's security detail." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't look," Olivia replied, making a sharp turn onto a narrow side street. "But first, you need to see what I found." There's a tablet in the glove compartment. With trembling fingers, I retrieved it. The screen illuminated my face with its cold blue glow as files automatically opened, medical records, insurance documents, and a video file marked simply nurse testimony. "Play it," Olivia instructed, taking another abrupt turn. "You need to know everything." The woman on the screen was in her 50s, her grey-streaked hair pulled back severely, dark circles under her eyes. She identified herself as Catherine Mercer, night shift nurse at Memorial Children's Hospital, Oncology Ward. "I've worked in pediatric oncology for 27 years, she began, her voice steady but strained. "What I witnessed the night of April 17, 2011, violates everything I stand for as a medical professional." I gasped. April 17th. The night Emma died. At approximately 2:15 a.m., I observed Richard Blackwood entering the medication room, Nurse Mercer continued. This was unusual as family members aren't permitted in that area. When I approached him, he claimed he was looking for a staff bathroom. I directed him elsewhere, but something felt wrong. The nurse took a deep breath. 30 minutes later, Emma Winter's vitals crashed. During resuscitation efforts, I noticed her 4 bag had been tampered with. The seal was compromised. When I reported this to my supervisor, Mr. Blackwood was already there, insisting that extraordinary measures be stopped, that his stepdaughter had suffered enough. Tears streamed down my face. I remembered Richard gently convincing me to sign the DNR paperwork weeks earlier. "Just in case," he'd said. "We don't want her suffering needlessly if things take a turn." My concerns were dismissed, the nurse continued. The death was attributed to complications from her condition. 2 days later, I was terminated for protocol violations. I filed reports with hospital administration and even the police, but nothing came of it. Then I received this. She held up a letter. The camera zoomed in to reveal Richard's company letterhead and a thinly veiled threat about defamatory statements and permanent damage to employability in healthcare. "I had 3 children to support," Nurse Mercer said, her voice breaking. "I couldn't fight a man with those kinds of resources. But I've carried this guilt for years. When Ms. Bennett contacted me, I knew it was time to tell the truth." The video ended. I sat frozen, the tablet clutched against my chest. "The insurance investigation was buried," Olivia explained, her voice gentle despite the tension of our escape. "Richard paid off key people. But the paper trail exists, the original lab results showing the foreign substance in Emma's system, the irregularities in the autopsy report, the sudden termination of staff who asked questions. He killed her," I whispered, the truth I'd suspected for hours now confirmed in devastating detail. "He killed my baby for money." "Not just money," Olivia corrected, swerving suddenly onto a dirt-access road. "Power." The insurance payout was substantial, but the real value was in Emma's trust fund, money from your parents that would have been controlled by you as her guardian until she turned 25. With her gone and you devastated, Richard gained control of everything. The SUVs behind us had disappeared momentarily, but headlights swept across nearby trees as they searched side roads. "How did you find all this?" I asked, struggling to process the magnitude of Richard's betrayal. When I was analyzing the Richardson files, I found references to historical liability settlements. Richard has a pattern, buying distressed companies with hidden legal exposure, then burying the evidence. Olivia slowed the car, approaching what looked like an abandoned warehouse. One file mentioned the winter's precedent, the template for making problems disappear. Your maiden name caught my attention. The car rolled to a stop inside the warehouse. Olivia quickly cut the engine and headlights. This was my father's, she explained, helping Lily from the backseat. He owned a small shipping business before he died. The company went under, but the property's still in probate. Nobody knows about it. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into a sparse living space, a few cots, a small kitchenette, computers, and communication equipment on folding tables. Our contingency plan, Olivia explained, setting up Lily with her oxygen tank. I've been preparing for weeks, ever since I realized what we were dealing with. But why? I asked, the question that had been burning inside me. Why risk everything, your safety, Lily's safety, to expose Richard? To help me. Olivia's eyes met mine. Because 15 years ago, I was Emma. My confusion must have shown on my face. Not literally, she clarified. But I was a sick child with a single mother. The difference is, my mother didn't have anyone to help her when the medical bills became overwhelming. Her voice caught. She took out loans from some dangerous people. When she couldn't pay, they came collecting. I was 11 when I found her. Understanding dawned. That's why you kept Lily's condition from your co-workers. She nodded. I learned early that vulnerability can be exploited. But then you showed up at my door, the wife of the man who destroyed my career, offering help without conditions. Olivia smiled sadly. You changed everything, Claire. You showed me that sometimes people can be better than their circumstances. A notification pinged from one of the computers. Olivia rushed over, her expression darkening. What is it? I asked. Police bulletin, she said grimly. Richard has reported you kidnapped. There's an APB out with both our descriptions. He's claiming I'm mentally unstable, seeking revenge for being fired. My blood ran cold. He's trying to turn this into a manhunt. It gets worse, Olivia continued scrolling. He's saying Lily was abducted too, claiming I'm having a psychotic break that puts my daughter at risk. That's insane. No one would believe. People will believe whatever the news tells them, Olivia cut me off. And Richard owns half the media outlets in this state. I sank into a chair, the weight of our situation crushing down. What do we do now? We can't run forever. We don't have to. Olivia's voice had taken on a steel edge I'd never heard before. The Richardson files are already with federal prosecutors. That's just corporate crime. But Emma's case. She knelt before me, taking my hands. That's murder, Claire. And I have a contact at the FBI who's very interested in both cases. Hope flickered faintly. You've been planning this all along. Since the moment I realized what Richard did to your daughter, yes. Olivia squeezed my hands. But we need to move quickly. My contact needs your formal statement to proceed with. The warehouse door burst open with a deafening crash. Armed men in tactical gear swarmed in, laser sights dancing across the space. FBI. Nobody move. Olivia raised her hand slowly. Agent Donovan? It's me, we spoke earlier. A tall woman with a severe ponytail stepped forward, her weapon trained on Olivia. Olivia Bennett? You're under arrest for kidnapping and child endangerment. What? No, check your files. We had an arrangement. The only arrangement, came a familiar voice from behind the agents, was the one I made with the Bureau this afternoon. Richard stepped into the warehouse, immaculate in his bespoke suit despite the hour. He looked completely at ease among the armed agents. Claire, darling, he said, his voice dripping with concern, thank God we found you. Are you hurt? Did she harm you? The female agent, Donovan, looked between us, confusion evident. Mr. Blackwood, you said your wife was taken against her will. She was, Richard insisted. Ms. Bennett has been harassing my wife for months, ever since her justified termination. Mental instability, paranoid delusions, it's all in her personnel file. I stared in horror as Richard smoothly took control of the narrative. Of course he had contacts in the FBI. Of course he would get to them first. That's not true, I said, finding my voice. None of it is true. Richard killed my daughter. He poisoned her for her trust fund. The evidence is right there. I pointed to the tablet on the table. Richard's expression was a masterpiece of concerned compassion. Agent Donovan, my wife suffered a breakdown after her daughter's death years ago. Ms. Bennett has clearly exploited that trauma to manipulate her. Agent Donovan hesitated, glancing at the tablet. For one hopeful moment, I thought she might listen. Then Richard added softly, just like we discussed in your director's office this evening. The agent's face hardened. She gestured to her team. Secure Ms. Bennett and the child. Have medical examine them both. No. I lunged forward as agents moved toward Lily, who was now crying in terror. Leave her alone. She needs her oxygen. Strong hands gripped my arms, restraining me. Richard approached, his face a mask of loving concern for anyone watching, but his eyes cold with triumph as he leaned close to my ear. You should have remembered who I am, Claire, he whispered. I built this city. I own the people who make the rules. And I always win. As they led Olivia away in handcuffs, her eyes locked with mine across the warehouse. In that moment, a silent communication passed between us. This wasn't over. Then I noticed something odd. Despite the chaos, Olivia's expression held not despair, but determination. And as the agents guided her past the computer station, her shoulder brushed against a small device attached to one of the laptops. A tiny light began blinking green. Claire, sweetheart, the doctors say you can come home tomorrow. Richard's voice oozed concern as he sat beside my hospital bed, the perfect picture of a devoted husband. His hand rested on mine, a possessive gesture for the benefit of the nurse checking my vital signs. 3 days had passed since the warehouse raid. 3 days since I'd been sedated and admitted to the private psychiatric facility Richard had selected. 3 days of being told I was having a delusional episode triggered by unresolved grief. Where's Olivia? I asked, my voice raspy from disuse. And Lily? Richard's fingers tightened imperceptibly on mine. Ms. Bennett is facing serious charges. As for her daughter, social services has placed her with a foster family while her mother's issues are addressed. The nurse finished her tasks and left us alone. The moment the door closed, Richard's facade cracked, his expression hardening. You've created quite a mess, Claire, he said, voice low and dangerous. Fortunately, your psychiatric history makes this situation manageable. Grief-induced psychosis, exacerbated by a manipulative former employee with her own mental health problems. Very sad, very private. The media has been respectfully asked to keep their distance. They separated Lily from her oxygen, I whispered. She needs specific medications, specific care. The child is receiving appropriate medical attention, Richard cut me off dismissively. Your misplaced concern should be directed toward your own recovery. There's a board meeting Monday where I'll need my wife present, composed, and appropriately supportive. I stared at the ceiling, letting him believe I was beaten. What happened to the files? The evidence. His smile was cold satisfaction itself. Fabrications and manipulations created by an unstable woman with a vendetta. The FBI's cybercrime unit has already determined the documents were altered. As for Nurse Mercer's so-called testimony, he actually chuckled, poor woman suffers from early-onset dementia. Very tragic. Her family is grateful for the specialized care facility I've arranged. The depths of his power and cruelty stole my breath. How many lives had he destroyed to protect himself? How many people had he silenced? You did kill her, didn't you? I asked, finally looking directly at him. You can admit it now. No one will believe me anyway. Something flickered in Richard's eyes, pride, perhaps, at finally being acknowledged for his cleverness. Emma was never going to survive, Claire. I simply accelerated the inevitable. That insurance policy changed everything for us. Built our fortune. Our life. Not our life, I whispered. Your life. I've just been a prop in it. He shrugged. A role you played admirably until recently. Rest now. Tomorrow we begin rebuilding your public image. Small appearances, carefully managed. By the time the Richardson acquisition clears regulatory approval next month, this unpleasantness will be forgotten. After he left, I closed my eyes, tears streaming silently down my face. Richard had won, just as he always did. Olivia imprisoned. Lily in foster care. Me, discredited and soon to be drugged into compliant silence. All evidence destroyed or discredited. Except for one thing. The blinking device. My mind replayed that final moment in the warehouse, Olivia's determined expression, the deliberate brush against the computer, the small light blinking green. It wasn't despair in her eyes but resolution. She had been expecting the raid. Prepared for it. Hours later, as darkness fell and the hospital quieted for the night, the door to my room opened silently. A young orderly I hadn't seen before slipped in, quickly checking the hallway before approaching my bed. Mrs. Blackwood, she whispered urgently, I have a message from Olivia Bennet. My heart lurched. Is she okay? And Lily? They're safe. That's all I can tell you. She pressed something small and cold into my palm. A flash drive. Olivia said to tell you that the black box activated as planned. She said you'd understand. The black box. The blinking device. Suddenly I remembered a conversation weeks earlier when Olivia had explained her insurance policies against Richard ever discovering our connection. If anything ever happens, she had said, I have a system in place. A dead man switch. If I don't enter a code every 24 hours, everything gets sent automatically. Everything. Sent where? I had asked. Her smile had been grim. Everywhere. The orderly was already backing toward the door. One more thing. Turn on the television. Channel 7. After she disappeared, I fumbled for the remote with trembling fingers. The local news was just returning from commercial break. The anchor's serious expression filled the screen. Breaking tonight, federal authorities have launched a massive investigation into Blackwood Industries following the release of thousands of internal documents appearing to show criminal activity at the highest levels of the corporation. CEO Richard Blackwood is accused of environmental crimes, securities fraud, witness tampering, and most shockingly, potential involvement in the death of his stepdaughter 15 years ago. My hand flew to my mouth as the screen showed Richard being escorted from his office in handcuffs, his face contorted with rage. The documents were released simultaneously to federal prosecutors, media outlets, and regulatory agencies in what cybersecurity experts are calling one of the most sophisticated information dumps in corporate whistleblower history. The anchor continued, in a related development, previous allegations against former Blackwood employee Olivia Bennet have been withdrawn, with the FBI now acknowledging that initial reports were based on potentially falsified information provided by Richard Blackwood himself. The screen split to show Olivia leaving a government building, Lily held tightly in her arms. They were surrounded by attorneys and federal agents, protecting them, not arresting them. Sources close to the investigation tell us that a deathbed confession from night nurse Catherine Mercer, recorded just months ago, provided crucial corroboration of allegations that Blackwood tampered with his stepdaughter's medication to accelerate her death and gain control of substantial trust funds. Nurse Mercer. She had known she was dying and made sure the truth wouldn't die with her. My hand clutched the flash drive tightly as more pieces fell into place. Olivia hadn't just been gathering evidence, she'd been building a bulletproof case, anticipating every way Richard might try to discredit or destroy it. The dead man switch had worked perfectly. The moment the FBI raid happened without the proper authorization codes, the raid Richard had orchestrated through his connections, Olivia's system automatically released everything. Not just to one agency Richard could influence, but to dozens of outlets simultaneously. Too many fires for even Richard to extinguish. A soft knock at my door made me quickly hide the flash drive under my pillow. But instead of hospital staff, Agent Donovan entered, the same FBI agent who had led the warehouse raid. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said, her expression troubled. "I owe you an apology. We were misled by your husband." "You mean he owned you, just like he owned everyone else?" I replied coldly. She didn't deny it. "I've been removed from the case. New agents will be here in the morning to take your statement, agents from outside this jurisdiction, reporting directly to Washington." She hesitated. "For what it's worth, I didn't know about your daughter." "None of us did." "What happened to her?" "I'm truly sorry." After she left, I sat in the darkness, watching the news coverage unfold. Richard's empire collapsing in real time. The truth about Emma finally exposed. Justice, after 15 years of silent grief. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Safe house ready when you are. Lily asked me to tell you her oxygen is working perfectly. We're waiting for you." Oh. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Not grief or fear or the hollow emptiness I'd lived with for so long. Something brighter. Hope. Dawn was breaking when I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice. No one tried to stop me. Richard's influence had evaporated overnight, and with it, his control over me. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the crisp morning air of freedom. In my pocket, the flash drive containing the final pieces of evidence that would ensure Richard never hurt anyone again. In my heart, the certainty that Emma could finally rest in peace. My phone buzzed again with an address. A taxi pulled up moments later, as if summoned by something more than coincidence. "Where to?" the driver asked. I took a deep breath, stepping toward my new life. To my family. As the car pulled away from the hospital, I watched the building recede in the rear window, along with the past that had imprisoned me for 15 years. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenges, and the daunting prospect of building a life of my own choosing. But also waiting were Olivia and Lily, the unlikely saviors who had shown me that sometimes, the family we need isn't the one we're born into or marry into, but the one we create through courage, truth, and second chances. For Emma. For Lily. For myself. We had all deserved better. And now, against all odds, we would have it. Thank you for following Claire's journey from captivity to freedom, from silent complicity to courageous action. If this story of finding strength and family in unexpected places touched your heart, please subscribe for more emotional narratives that explore the depths of human resilience. What would you have done in Claire's position? Could you have found the courage to stand against someone as powerful as Richard? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters to this community of readers and storytellers. Until next time, remember that sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our deepest wounds.